Ladies and gentlemen, after a very long wait, a very long grind, way more games than I played, playing Eldlich, we have finally done it. We have made it to Platinum 1, the very maximum rank on this account. This is our second account we've done this on. Here I'm just kind of showing off some more, some of my stats, excuse me. I just completely miscalculated my win rate. I did the 67 over 83. It should be the 52 over the 67. So it's a little bit less than an 80% win rate. So I was able to make it to Platinum 1 with a 77-ish percent win rate, which is significantly less than I was able to do with the Eldlich deck. A lot of my losses are to myself making misplays, and a lot of my losses are to the deck bricking. So probably one in about every 10 or so games you're going to draw a hand that's completely unplayable. Super good player might find a way to extend the game and grind it out, giving them a much higher win rate. And then I personally feel that myself, I'm responsible for at least 13% of those games, at least the, 13% of those games, because I have about a 77%-ish win rate. So 13% of those, completely my fault, just making mistakes, doing the combos in the wrong order, stuff like that, brainlessly activating cards when I don't need to, just kind of mistakes. This deck's not simple to play, it's not easy to play, but I was able to finally make it to Platinum 1. Completely free to play, by the way, as well. So I hope that gives everybody hope who is wanting to not spend any money on this game. That it's not pay to win whatsoever. It's pay to play. Once you get your deck, you can't pay extra money. Basically, like a Clash of Clans type game to get even further ahead, and you can craft every card. So as long as you're making the correct purchases, which I've kind of shown off throughout the channel, you are going to do pretty good. So this is the definitive Drytron deck profile. I'm going to try to explain everything and all the situations where everything comes up, so just kind of bear with me if I take a super long time. The very first thing we're going to go through is the Drytron cards. The Drytron normal monsters all share the same effect, that they cannot be normal summoned or set, and that they must tribute a Drytron or a ritual monster to special summon them from your hand or from the graveyard. And then once you do that, the Drytrons will get various effects that we'll go through later, but they will tack on the effect that you can no longer special summon cards that could be normal summoned. So that just kind of doesn't really come up in the deck, but it does limit the options we are allowed to use. So the first Drytrons we'll talk about are your based Drytrons, the best ones you can get. Alpha. Alpha, when you use its effect to summon it, is going to search you a ritual monster. We play quite a few. We'll get into what those do later. Zeta is going to search you a ritual spell. That is also super important. The limiting factor often in this deck and your ability to combo off is the ritual spell. So perhaps Zeta is slightly better than Alpha, but Alpha really does tutor you just about everything in your deck indirectly. Okay, for the other two Drytrons, we play one Delta. Delta essentially just lets you reveal a ritual monster or a ritual spell and draw a card. This card requires setup, so we don't really want to run more than just the one. Anything more might brick us. Drawing multiple of this card is not worth running, basically. We aren't willing to have the downside of being able to potentially draw more because the effect is just not good enough in a standalone light. Gamma, you have to run this card. You definitely don't want to draw it. But this card, basically, when you use its effect to summon itself, that I discussed before, you are allowed to summon another Drytron name from your graveyard. This can help you tack on 2,000 more damage, as they all have 2,000 attack. But most of the time, you're just using this to overlay into a rank 1 Xyz, which we'll get into slightly later. For the last engine card, and then I'll get into hand traps, half hand traps, and then basically bricks in the deck. We run 3 Diviner of the Herald, rather, excuse me. This is the best card in the deck. It allows you to send a fairy from your deck or your extract to the graveyard and increase this card's level by the level you sent. So you're pretty much always sending a level 4, so this card's always going to be level 6. It is also a light fairy, so it's searchable off of a numerous cards that we'll talk about as we continue on into the deck. It's level 2 as well, so that also allows it even more synergy. Okay. Next card we're going to talk about is Eva. Eva is currently banned in the TCG as of yesterday. But this card says that if it's sent to the graveyard, you can banish up to 2 other light fairies from your graveyard, and if you do, search level 2 or lower light fairies from your deck. And you can't search Eva with Eva, unfortunately. But you can banish Eva with Eva, which does come up very often. So the only 2 cards that this card can search in the entire deck are your Diviner of the Herald and your Herald of the Orange Light. Diviner of the Herald is a starter, really, really good, so there's some situations where you do need to Eva try to get to this card, because this card is going to unlock a lot of your combos and a lot of your plays. It's ultra rare for a reason. Trust me, one of the best cards you can draw in the deck. And if you don't draw it, you're searching it, I also promise. And then we're going to talk about kind of an in-betweener. This is a hand trap, and it's a card that we're going to be searching in our deck. Level 2 Light Fairy, so we're searchable off Eva, and we're also sendable off of the Diviner. We're never sending Orange Light ever, I promise, but just so you know, the effect of this card is essentially, if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can discard this card and 1 other Light Fairy and negate that activation and destroy it. That is super, super good against hand traps. Having a hand trap that we can search out to play against hand traps is really awesome. I'm sure you guys kind of saw my upload earlier where I talked about how the hand trap meta is kind of getting out of control, but this card is super vital to be able to play around cards like Maxi. Nibiru especially is one of the most important cards to be able to play around. This card plays around Gamma, just really any hand trap in the format. If you hard draw it, you can negate Max C with it, and that's going to be insanely powerful. You run 3 because you just need 3 to tutor with your Eva as you get kind of further into the grind game. You want as many negations as possible. So we run Eva mostly for discard fodder for a card we'll talk about later that really, really loves Eva. And I'll talk about the card that loves Eva later. It's the boss monster of our deck, so I'm going to save it for very last. Okay, for the rituals, the non-effect monsters, we can't normal summon these cards, obviously, but we're very quickly going to go through the best one, which is Cyber Angel Ben 10. Cyber Angel Ben 10 essentially says that when you ritual summon this, or sorry, not when you ritual summon this card, when this card destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, inflict damage to your opponent equals to that monster's original defense in the graveyard. There's some situations where this does come up and you can burn your opponent for game, but we're mostly concerned with the effect that if this card is tributed, we can add 1 Light Fairy monster from our deck to our hand. I've already gone over quite a few of the Light Fairies. There's 1 more in the deck that we'll talk about that you are often going to search off of Ben 10 last in your combo, but for now, know that Ben 10 can search Eva, Herald of the Orange Light, Diviner of the Herald, and the boss of the deck, and we'll talk about the boss, like I said, last. It also has 1800 attack, which is less than all the Drytrons, which is important for the ritual card, which we will, I'll explain at the end of explaining the ritual monsters. So we also run for the Cyber Angel package, we run Cyber Angel Natasha. This is a card that I wasn't convinced of initially, but don't be fooled by its normal, common rarity. This is perhaps the most powerful card in the deck in the correct situation. It can out entire boards, gain you a seemingly infinite amount of life points. It's your win condition against burn. It's just a Light Fairy that we can negate with. We can discard with Orange Light or the boss of the deck, which we'll talk about when we get to it. But I'm going to go ahead and read all the effects of Natasha because it's probably the most complicated card in the deck. Not complicated, but very texty. Very texty. So once per turn, you can target 1 monster you control, gain life points, half its attack. That's what I mean when I say that it is the win condition versus burn. Because you're just going to gain a ton of life points and they're not going to be able to kill you. And then the card that does not, the effect that does not get read all the time is this effect right here. When a ritual monster you control is targeted for an attack, you can negate that attack. You can do this infinite times in a turn, which is really, really sick against players that aren't reading. Yeah, but the most important effect of this card is that if this card is in your graveyard, you can banish 1 other Cyber Angel monster from your graveyard and target 1 monster your opponent controls, special summon this card, and if you do, take control of that monster. So the first thing you need to understand about rituals is that in order to have them be resummonable from the graveyard, they must first be ritual summoned, quote-unquote properly summoned. You may have heard of this term when dealing with cards like Stardust Dragon in the past, but Natasha is also the case of it can't be special summoned from the graveyard unless you ritual summon it first. So you do need to ritual summon it, tribute it off, link it off, do whatever you need to do. Get it into the graveyard, and then you can start stealing your opponent's stuff, gaining tons and tons of life points. You can do that infinite amounts of times per turn. So you can take a card, say they have 2 Eldlich the Golden Lords on their side of the field. You can Natasha take one, get rid of Natasha somehow, either with a ritual card, a link, and a synchro in some fringe situations, which I've kind of shown off some situations where you do synchro with Natasha and it's super sick. But you can just take their whole board and gain tons and tons of life points, and if the Eldlich deck does not have its Eldlich going, the Eldlich train cannot go, the deck just cannot get off the ground. The penultimate card we'll talk about for the ritual section is our only Drytron ritual card. We don't run the Heavy Storm card because it's just not quite good enough. This deck plays into back row already extremely well, just because of the way that all the cards function. So another thing I want to mention about the Drytrons is that they will work under skill drain. So you can't effect Veiler or imperm a Drytron because the effect is resolving to search in the hand or in the graveyard. So that makes this deck really powerful against skill drain, and it makes it really immune to some of the more popular hand traps in the format. There are cards you can negate, but if your opponent is not really reading your cards and is not super familiar with the deck, you can oftentimes get value that way, just because you're playing a complicated deck with tons and tons of text, and you did the reading and then they didn't. So, back to what I was trying to say about Meteonis Drytron. Basically, this card is a 4K beater that we have in our deck so that we can OTK people. There are some cool stuff we can do with it on our opponent's turn, and I'll kind of go through that real quick. But essentially, this card is special summoned using 2 Drytrons as material. We'll talk about kind of how we are able to do that. You see it's level 12, and that's not really how rituals work, but this deck doesn't really care how rituals work. Essentially, the effect that we need to know is that this card can attack as many special summon monsters as your opponent has, which is really great. Say again they have the multiple Drytron or the multiple Eldlich board, one of them is 3,500. We can just attack over both, no problem, and then potentially OTK them if our hand is good enough. And obviously they don't have back row to stop us. The other effect of this card, which comes up significantly less because you're oftentimes not making this card in your very first turn, is that during your opponent's turn, you can banish monsters from your graveyard whose combined attack equals either 2,000 or 4,000, so 1 or 2 Drytrons, and then send that many cards that you banished to the graveyard, which is good because it's not destruction necessarily, but it does target, so it is not quite that good. It's not quite that crazy, if that makes sense. And then finally, I know I've kind of mentioned this card a few times, but Herald of Ultimateness. 2,000 attack is perfect for this deck. We'll talk about Meteonis Drytron in just 1 second, I promise, guys, but first and foremost, we want to talk about what Herald of Ultimateness does. Basically, this is a walking Solemn Judgment, Solemn Strike combination. When your opponent would special summon a monster, or monsters, so they have a Pendulum Summon, or an Xyz, or a Link, or a Synchro, or anything of that variety that's an inherent summon, we can send 1 Light Fairy from our hand to our graveyard and negate it. If we send Eva, we can search 2 more Light Fairies, get more negates, as long as we have the Light Fairies necessary in our graveyard to do that. To banish for Eva's effect, I mean. And then you can also negate any spell trap or monster effect your opponent is going to throw out there. So you can negate, often it's going to be 4 or 5 negates if you're able to set this up on turn 1 and you're uninterrupted, which is pretty much a negate for every single card that they have, which is phenomenal. This is the boss monster of our deck. It's probably the best card in our deck, searchable by Diviner in a roundabout way, which we'll talk about in just a moment. This card also tutors it. This card tutors it. So, everything in this deck is extremely, extremely searchable. And then finally, we have made it to the spells and traps. First and foremost, I'm going to talk about Meteonis Drytron. So basically what Meteonis Drytron says, the effects that you need to know, is that you can ritual summon a monster, and instead of using levels, you use the attack. So say you want to ritual summon a Herald of Ultimateness. You just need to use a card with equal to are with more than or equal to 2,000 attack. So any of our Drytron names will do that. So that's why this card is really good and synergistic with the Drytron cards. And we'll talk about kind of a way to cheat out these ritual summons later with NXCs. The other effect of this card that you need to know is that if this card's in your graveyard, you can target one Drytron monster you control. It loses exactly 1,000 attack, and if it does, you can add this card back to your hand. You can only use the second effect of Meteonus Drytron once per turn, but we aren't really that concerned about it. We're usually going to be able to activate the first effect, Ritual Summoning, 3 times in a turn. The first one we get through various means, and then the second one we can also get from our deck, typically tutored with this card, or this card will also tutor it. And then we can obviously add the Drytron back once we use it. We can add the Meteonus Drytron back by reducing attack by 1,000, and we can continue to combo off that way. Alright, so Meteonus Drytron, now that that's been explained, I'm going to go on to Drytron Nova. Drytron Nova is super cool. It just says, summon a Drytron monster from your deck, but destroy it during the end phase. We don't care about that. We're using it for material, we're using it for synchro, we're using it for links, we're using it for ritual. It's not going to get destroyed. Don't forget that you, Drytron Nova brought something out and then leave it on the board. That's definitely not what we want to do. We can only activate one Drytron Nova per turn, but because the card is so powerful, we want to max out on it. And it's also going to tack on that Drytron restriction, but we don't care about that. We've built our deck so that we don't mind being restricted. Alright, so that's it for the Drytron specific spells. Now I'm going to talk about just a couple kind of quote-unquote generic cards that add consistency to our deck, and then I'll talk about kind of tech cards in a little later, because I think I brushed over Max C as well, but those are, that kind of falls in line with the flex cards. So first and foremost, we're going to run Foolish Burial. I already mentioned that all the Drytron effects are going to work from your graveyard as well as your hand, so you can tribute a ritual monster or a Drytron in your hand and special summon the Drytron, getting their effect onto the board. Super good. The other thing you can do with this card is, in fringe situations, you can send the ritual that you need. Oh, the other thing I need to mention about Drytron, Meteonus Drytron, is that we can ritual summon the monster from our graveyard. So if we're tributing Ben 10 or tributing Herald of Ultimateness to special summon a Drytron, it does not matter. We can get that card right back out of our graveyard. That is what makes this card so powerful, because not only can you recur the card itself back from the graveyard, but we are able to recur the rituals themselves back from the graveyard. So, super sweet there. This card is insanely powerful. It's pretty much the whole reason that we are playing the deck, is because the ritual card is so good. And then the Drytrons themselves are also so good. So yeah, Foolish Burial tutors tons and tons and tons of your deck, can get you a +1 in certain situations with Eva, and yeah, we just want to run it because we want to maximize consistency, maximize our options. Yeah, play this card. It's pretty good. It's limited for a reason, guys. And then we're going to talk about Cyber Emergency. So we're not going to read all of this. We are going to read the first 2 lines. It just says, add 1 Light Machine monster that cannot be normal summoned or set. We do not care about anything else. That is going to tutor us all of our Drytron cards, which is all we care about. We can only activate 1 Cyber Emergency per turn, but because of the versatility of either being able to add either Alpha or Zeta, or Gamma or Delta, or the Ritual, or whatever we need, we're going to max out on this card because it basically is going to hopefully get us the other piece of the combo that we need to combo off. The other card, another generic searcher card we're going to run is Preparation of Rites. Preparation of Rites is a card that can really make your craziest turns even crazier, allowing you to ritual summon up to 4 times per turn, or if you draw 2 prep, you can ritual summon 5 times per turn if you're just a complete psycho. I don't really know what situation that would be optimal in, but theoretically you could do it. This card just adds a level 7 or lower ritual monster from your deck to your hand, and then if we have a ritual spell in our graveyard, we can add that back to your hand. You don't always want to get this +1. Oftentimes you just need to search the Ben 10 out so you can get your engine rolling. I know that the +1 greed has trapped me in at least 4 or 5 games where I've just completely ruined my hand because I'm like, yes, I want to get the +1 off of Preparation of Rites, because that's just how my brain as a control player works. But combo decks are not forgiving like that in any regard. So you'll learn the hard way when you can activate prep for the +1 and when you can't. So that does it for the consistency cards. Now we're just going to talk about cards that are basically tech for the meta. We are running 3 Maxi. This card's really, really good. In the mirror match particularly, drawing it going second is phenomenal. Usually it's going to either stop your opponent or give you such an advantage. Drawing, even 1 card off of Maxi is usually going to be pretty good because it's going to prevent your opponent from, comboing off the way they would wish to. Drawing 2 is, that's phenomenal. As long as they can't kill you, drawing as many cards is good. This can contribute to some of your brick hands, but I feel that the upside of Maxi in this format specifically, it's not the best against Eldlich, but typically if the Eldlich player will get themselves into a situation where they're going to activate Conquistador, and then they're going to activate Sanguine as Chainlink 2, and chaining Maxi to that will get you 2 draws, and against the Eldlich matchup, that's going to be pretty much a blowout versus them. Another card, this is a card we run specifically for Eldlich, and the other card is another card we run specifically for Eldlich, Lightning Storm. It's insanely broken, guys. Lightning Storming back row is just, it's phenomenal. It's better than Harpy's Feather Duster, obviously, because it has that versatile ability to also be able to clear monsters, and then clearing spells traps is obviously extremely good in this deck and against Eldlich specifically. And then the final card that we run, this is Called by the Grave. It's semi-limited, so we're running 2. If we could run 3, we would definitely run 3. I don't know what we would necessarily cut, but this card is completely crazy. If you draw this on your very first turn, it is going to make your combo ability happen almost all the time, because you can Call by the Grave either a Maxi, pretty much any hand trap that's not exactly Psy-Frame, Gear, Gamma, or Nibiru, we can Call by the Grave and deal with it for the turn. So allowing us to combo off, no fear. I also have a replay on my channel showing off just how powerful this card can be versus the Eldlich deck. So yeah, check it out. We definitely run this card. I would max out. Like I said, if I could run 3 of this card, I would certainly run 3 because of just its insane power versus the hand traps in this game. Called by the Graving Ash, Called by the Graving Maxi, Called by the Graving Eldlord. These are really, really, really good cards to Called by. So run this card, guys. Run this card. Alright, so that does it for the main deck. We're going to go ahead and get into the extra deck. First of all, I'll talk about the cards we send off of Diviner of the Herald. First card we send is Elder Entity Entis. Entis essentially says that when it's sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 card on the field, destroy it. This is basically going to be your back row removal, popping any set cards that your opponent may have, or dealing with a problem monster so that you can get game in certain situations where you don't need to search. Just giving you another versatile card to send. It's still level 4, so you're able to have your normal Diviner of the Herald level. No weirdness there. The other card we're sending is Herald the Arclight. Herald the Arclight just says when it's sent to the graveyard, we can search a ritual monster or a ritual spell. Oftentimes we're searching the ritual spell, sometimes we're searching the ritual monster. It really just depends on what you need in your hand to get going. That wraps out the cards that we're sending off of Diviner of the Herald. We only have the 3. It rarely comes up that you need more, almost never. Pretty much never. I actually cannot think of a situation where it would come up that we would need another copy. Just because we only run the 3. Diviner of the Herald. Potentially a situation where we wish we had another Entis, or we wish we had another Arclight may come up, but these are situations that really fringe. So the next card we're going to talk about is F.A. Dawn Dragster. F.A. Dawn Dragster gains attack equal to its level times 300. That's important because the second effect of this card is that it has an F.A. effect. We don't care about that. But if your opponent activates a spell or trap, we can negate it once per turn and reduce this card's level by 2. Make this card in defense, because if you don't, it's going to lose 600 attack and it's going to be 1500, and you really don't want that. Dawn Dragster is really good because we can make it with the level 6 Diviner of the Herald and any of our Drytron cards. This is a good card to play into Max C. So if your opponent Max C's you and you don't have the Call by the Grave or you don't have the Orange Light to negate it, oftentimes giving them 1 more draw to make Dawn Dragster is going to be worth it. Just because we have 1 negate and maybe that can save us and tide us off for the next turn. We'll talk about all the Zeus cards together after I talk about Mu Beta Fafnir. Mu Beta Fafnir has the persistent effect that when you ritual summon a monster, you can detach this card. You can attach cards from you can attach materials from this card instead of using cards, in your hand or on the field. So I talked about a little earlier how we could cheat out cards, quote unquote, cheat out the ritual cards. This is pretty much how. So when we activate YuGiOh Drytron, we can summon a ritual from our graveyard even or from our hand, and then we use the Mu Beta materials as tribute, which is really good because we're basically not negging any card economy. We're not losing any card economy. The other effect of Mu Beta Fafnir is that when this card is XC summoned, we can send one Drytron card from our deck to our hand. Most of the time we're going to be sending, maybe Gamma, maybe Delta, maybe Zeta, basically just whichever we need for whatever situation we found ourselves in. Getting another Drytron name into the graveyard is super good. Sometimes you even need to send YuGiOh Drytron so that you can get rituals going, or maybe you somehow found a way, you somehow found yourself locked out of YuGiOh Drytron and you need to ritual summon to make a good turn 1 board or turn 2 board or something like this. So this card's versatility is really, really good. And the last effect of this card is that when your opponent activates a spell or trap card while you control a machine ritual monster, you can attach one XC's material, negate and destroy it. That is just about never coming up. We can technically summon a machine ritual in the YuGiOh Draconid, but not really what we want to do. We want to be negating things with Herald ultimateness instead of Mu Beta Fafnir, because we want to use the Mu Beta Fafnir material for ritual summons, essentially, is all you need to know. And then Beatrice is a super important card for our deck. Essentially, when Diviner of the Herald goes to level 6, we are going to be ritual summoning Ben 10 very often and overlaying these two into a Beatrice. Beatrice's effect is a quick effect, meaning you can activate it on either player's turn, chain it to things, whatnot. I'm sure you guys know what quick effects are, but I'm just kind of trying to make this a very accessible deck profile. Essentially, with Beatrice, we can send Gamma often, and Gamma will allow us to overlay into Mu Beta Fafnir, continuing our combo that way. But Beatrice is a card that can send anything. So if we have a good enough hand, there's some situations where we're sending Eva and getting more negates on our turn, and then we can send Eva on their turn and get even more negates. Or perhaps our hands are really bad and we need to send Herald of Ultimateness so that we can YuGiOh Drytron it back from the graveyard. These are both effects that are super good. The body is also super nice, 25, 28. 2500 helps you get a lot of games, and 2800 is big enough that the Eldlord can't beat over it without special summoning from the hand and getting that 1000 attack. So we love Beatrice. This card's awesome. Oftentimes we're going to be linking this thing off on our opponent's turn with cards we'll talk about a little later. But to round out the XCs, we have the Thunder AA Zeus package. So first and foremost, we have the Assembled Nightingale, 2 level 1 monsters. We don't care about any effect except for that if this card has Xyz material, it can attack directly. Boom. We don't need anything else on this card. We're never detaching materials. Perhaps sometimes there are times where we need to detach a material and then basically make it so our Lyrilusk cards, this card included, cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects this turn. Say they turn to tribute the Lyrilusk summon. Something like that. And then during main phase 2, we are allowed to just XC summon Downward Magician just by overlaying it right on top of the Lyrilusk card. And then finally, the payoff for this 3-card engine is the Zeus AA Sky Thunder. Basically a quick effect that is going to nuke the board, blow everything up except for Zeus. We just have to detach 2 materials. So when we make this play, we're going to have Nightingale, who's got 2 materials, make Downward Magician, who will have 3 materials because we're just overlaying the Downward Magician on top, and then we are going to overlay Zeus on top of Downward Magician, which is going to be 4 materials. So 4 materials Zeus, basically 2 complete board nukes. This card is not once per chain, so even if your opponent activates a card to negate it and you have 2 more materials to detach, you can chain Zeus to that and destroy the cards before the negation happens. So Zeus is really strong, and it's worth dedicating the 3 cards in your extra deck for. Linkuriboh is a really important card for this deck as well, because we So oftentimes need to get our Drytrons into the graveyard so that we can get their effects to proc. That's going to be like, maybe you need to Drytron, maybe you Drytron Nova out one of your Drytrons and you need to get it into the graveyard so that you can use its effect. The effects of YuGiOh are not super important, but I will go over them really quick. You contribute this card, change your opponent's attack of a monster that basically is declared an attack to 0. You can negate basically, essentially one attack is what this lines up to, and then if this card is in your area, contribute one level 1 monster, special summon this card. Boom, and we can only use this effect, the recursion effect, once per turn. So, figured I'd just go over YuGiOh real quick. It's essentially just so that you can link things off that need to be in the graveyard to get their effect. IP Masquerena, this card's super awesome. I've definitely had a couple replays where it's been the MVP. This card essentially just says that during your opponent's turn, we can link summon. So we love doing that. We love linking into this card, Nightmare Unicorn. Nightmare Unicorn says that when it's link summoned, this is there's an effect for drawing a card, but we're not really caring about co-linking or any of that nonsense. We're just liking the effect that on our opponent's turn, we can IP Masquerena, link into this card, discard 1 card, shuffle 1 card into the deck that typically they control. Or we do this in the end phase, shuffling back a back row that we're scared of, or maybe set monsters that we can OTK them. Nightmare Unicorn super important to basically it's the payoff for Masquerena. So if you're in on Masquerena, you need Nightmare Unicorn. And then we will talk about Union Carrier. Union Carrier is a really cool utility card that gives you tons and tons of options. We can make it with anything in the deck because it just requires 2 monsters with the same type or attribute. Everything in our deck is light, luckily enough. So when we link summon this card, or when this card is link summoned, we cannot use it as link material that turn. So if this card didn't have this effect on it, it would be completely obviously banned in both the TCG and the OCG. The TCG has banned it, so in America you can't play this card. Same thing with Eva, those cards are considered too powerful. Ben 10 is also limited in the TCG, which just goes to show you the insane power level of this deck. Because it's pretty much never been stronger. There's not been an opportunity to play a stronger variant of this deck, so yeah, get after it. But Link Carrier's effect essentially says that we can equip a monster from our deck, and we are always pretty much equipping Eva, and then when we do, it's going to be 2000 attack, which I'm sure some of you already realize that this card is perfect to use for Meteonis Drytron, bringing this card out. Link Carrier goes to the graveyard, Eva goes to the graveyard with it. We summon it out, Eva gets 2 searches, and then we have 2 negates for Herald of Ultimateness. So, Union Carrier is a super cool card. The other effect that I want to mention is we can only tribute machine monsters with Meteonis Drytron. So, a bit weird, but we do need to... Wait, right, what is this card? Yeah. You must tribute machine. It has to be a machine monster. So, Union Carrier is the perfect card here. Alright, and then the final card we have in our deck is basically our Jank Destroyer Boral Sword Dragon. This card can make 2 attacks in the battle phase if you are targeting 1 attack position monster and changing into defense position, which is often going to be your monster. Maybe sometimes it's your opponent's monster, whatever. But the effect that we really care about is once per turn when this card declares an attack on a face-up monster, we can activate this effect. Until the end of the turn, this card gains attack equal to half that current monster's attack, and if it does, that current monster's attack is halved. So this is going to be our out for Apocryphal Towers, it's going to be our out for Chaos Max Dragon, just any kind of weird, undestroyable by card effects or untargetable by effects kind of card that would otherwise lock us out of the game. Okay, a lot of talking, a lot of explaining. This deck is by no means simple. Even a really experienced player like myself has had a ton of problems, but don't put too much pressure on yourself to play absolutely perfect. Yu-Gi-Oh is not about playing perfect. It's about playing better than your opponent. I know we all are striving for perfection, and perhaps you're a perfect player yourself. I'd really love to see your hundreds of YCS tops and your national championship victories and your world championship prize cards, but I digress. Hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile. Huge shout out to my best friend Alex for basically putting his soul into this deck, finding the right extra deck cards, finding the right ratios, getting this thing exactly perfect. he's a genius deck builder when it comes to combo, and he's an even better technical player, and I wouldn't be anywhere without him, pretty much. So, huge shout out to him. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Like, comment, and subscribe. It's been your boy, Neosynthesis. Peace.